Barack Obama released his family's tax returns and had to take kidding that your books will make you a lot more money if you're running for president while they're released. Hillary Clinton released her family's tax return and had to take something much sharper than kidding that she and her husband had made $109 million over a decade and were calling somebody else elitist. But in our fourth story tonight, John McCain released only his tax returns, not those of his wife, believed to be worth 9 figures as she is. But he did release their joint charitable donations, including ones that wound up at the schools their kids go to. Oh, some of his budget plan has also been revealed. It would see him as president borrow $2 trillion. How did he pull all this off? The tax returns show that most of his income, about $250,000 a year, comes from his Senate salary, the rest coming from book sales, his naval pension, and, as a senior citizen, from Social Security. McCain paid $84,000 in taxes last year, a rate of 34%, and donates all the royalties from his books to charity, about which more in a moment. Not included, the income of wife Cindy, who just happens to run an Anheuser-Busch distributorship, one of the nation's largest privately held, that is held by Cindy's family, beer distributorships. Various estimates putting her worth at around $100 million. All of which explaining how the McCains could afford to give $200,000 in charity last year, most of it to the McCain Family Foundation, which donates to organizations like the schools McCain's children attend. Mrs. McCain's beer money, however, vast as it might be, insufficient to bail out America in the McCain new budget plan. Bloomberg News today reporting that McCain calls for borrowing almost $2 trillion, which would then be combined with the savings realized from McCain's cuts in government spending on things like medical research, into a total of possibly more than $5 trillion in tax cuts over 8 years, mostly for the rich and corporations, such as, for instance, that pressing need to eliminate the estate tax on any inheritance up to $10 million. According to Bloomberg, talking to nonpartisan budget watchdog groups, McCain's claims of budget balancing rely on optimistic estimates of tax loophole closing and, in one case, a claim of saving $30 billion a year in tax breaks based on a Treasury Department report that estimated $27 billion could be saved over 10 years. And, of course, one slight omission from the McCain budget, no accounting for the $12 billion spent every month in Iraq and Afghanistan, which would total $14.5 trillion if the war were to go on, say, for 100 years. Let's bring in Rick Perlstein, who's the author of Nixon Land and senior fellow at America's Future and also contributor to The Nation magazine. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Keith, great to be here.
Let's start with these taxes. What's notable for being in them, and what's notable that we're not seeing?
Well, have you heard the new joke about John McCain? You know, of course, he's the candidate you want to have a beer with. His wife owns the beer company, okay. Right? And $100 million. They got the 2 sets of books. Do you remember why she says that she can't release her tax returns? Because she wants to protect the privacy of her daughters or her children. I call it the Julie Nixon option. Because it reminds me of when Richard Nixon sent his daughter out to give speeches about why he was innocent in Watergate, not telling her that he was guilty in Watergate. Yeah. And this whole idea of hiding behind your children to score a political point, if you still think this guy's a straight talker, he should be drawn and quartered, I think.
Well, if perhaps not in the taxes, let's turn to this budget, the leak here about wanting to freeze government spending. Is government spending not one of the prime levers that the government has to revive the economy if, say, the economy has suddenly gone bad, as this one has?
Sure. I mean, you may recall that when a recession comes, presidents talk about stimulus packages. That means you unfreeze government spending. You know, not only that, I mean, some of the tax cuts he's proposing are absurd. I mean, he's talking about a holiday for the gas tax. The gas tax goes straight into the trust fund for highways. Our highways are a mess. We had a bridge in Minneapolis plunge into the Mississippi River. And by the way, Keith, the guy who vetoed that tax bill, Tim Pawlenty, is the front runner to be John McCain's running mate.
And, of course, the Minneapolis Bridge will be something that might come up in the St. Paul Republican Convention, but that's something else. If McCain's going to balloon what is already clearly ballooned deficit spending here, who is he borrowing the money from, and what effect would that have on the rest of the country and the rest of the economy?
Well, I would say our children and our grandchildren, but it probably would be more accurate to say, you know, their children and their grandchildren, yeah. Maybe unto the 4th generation. You know, our infrastructure is a time bomb. I mean, the American Association of Civil Engineers gives our wastewater infrastructure, that's the pipes beneath the streets, you know, a D-. You know, we cannot keep this deferred maintenance going on anymore and expect to be a functioning civilization. I mean, it's all the conservatives got, tax cuts, although the day before yesterday he was saying that the tax cuts were irresponsible.
McCain's also said repeatedly, as we know, that his understanding of the economy is limited. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But who is driving his economic policy? Are these the same masterminds that gave us the Bush economy?
Well, John Chait wrote an article in the New Republic in which he pointed out that half of his economic advisors are budget hawks. You know, the people like the Concord Coalition who are saying that his speech the other day was lunacy. The other half are these kind of typical conservative trickle-down folks who are saying, you know, tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts. And, you know, it's not very nice to make fun of a 71-year-old for not being able to have a coherent thought, but he does seem to be doddering from one to the other from day to day.
Well, it's comforting that all his advisors can't have a comforting or a coherent thought either. It's nothing to do with age. Rick Perlstein, contributor to The Nation magazine. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Keith.